Hi, welcome back to another exciting week of Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Robert Winters.
Judy Nathans.
And today, I screwed up last week and said it was April. It's of course not April.
No.
It's August 29th.
29th, summer's going quickly.
I also said last week the year 2016. It's 2017. So
Wow,
now
I
I'm
guess
going to
you
make
want
that
to go
correction.
back, huh? Yeah.
No, it's not that.
I would like to. Let's do a do-over.
It's funny, you ever have that thing where it's sort of like the year changes, but you're still signing checks
Oh
and
yeah,
things?
it usually
putting it
lasts
on?
for a couple weeks.
I have actually put down the years like 2000, randomly I put
Wow.
down signing it to 2005. It's
Oh,
like
dear.
sometimes I'm off by 12 years. Sometimes.
Wow.
To me, it's suddenly when they clicked over from 1999 to 2000, everything was just off.
Yeah, I know. What did you even call it? I never understood the odd thing. Yeah.
Seriously. So actually, I do want to mention just one thing, which is actually up on the Civic Journal website, which is the passing of a really great man named Tom Raphael, who perhaps you folks have never heard of the man, but
No,
he was a member of the Winchester Water Board. He was a longtime member of the Middlesex Canal Association, chair of the Middlesex Canal Commission, a person who really made things happen in terms of historic preservation, a wonderful guy who held dozens of patents. Even at age 91 or 2, when he was becoming infirm and had mobility problems, he invented his own mobility device and applied for a patent for it.
Good for him.
In his 90s. So anyway, so Tom passed away on Saturday, so I thought I would just mention Tom.
He lived a nice long life, so.
Very much, yeah. Now the other thing, big news, I think it's probably worth mentioning, is what's happening in Texas.
Yeah, it's not,
And it's not political.
And it's awful. Yeah.
And it's pretty awful, yeah. Different points of view about, why is Texas being hit by this massive thing, but I've never actually heard of hurricane which just stalls in this particular way and just sort of sits there and keeps pumping and pumping and pumping rainwater.
It just can't go anywhere.
Site.
I guess it's a convergence of different atmospheric conditions.
Yeah, usually you see the pattern is usually hurricanes pass, and as soon as they hit the land, they downgrade and become a tropical storm, and then peter out. Right. This one just stays. It actually went back out to the water to pick up more power, and then came back in.
And the warmer waters, which some people would say has to do with climate change, but then we have those that say no. But
the New York Times said it's not so simple. You mentioned an interesting
thing that zoning. There's no zoning.
Yeah.
In
arguably in places like Massachusetts and Cambridge in particular, we sort of live and die by zoning. Like we'll zone a postage stamp size piece of property if we could. Houston, Texas, from my understanding, has no zoning whatsoever. So pretty much if you buy the property and you want to build,
you do whatever you want.
If you want to sprawl, you want to go up, you want to do anything you like, you just do it. No restrictions. And that has meant that people have built into lowland areas that would be normally very vulnerable in case of flooding, so that exacerbates the situation.
Yeah, I mean, there were things that could have been done, but like everything else, people don't look ahead. They don't listen to people that say this should be done, and then it gets to be. So it makes you think of Cambridge, and that we do have some stuff in place with looking at floods.
It's relatively recent recently that zoning is actually starting to take on this new role, which is to actually take into account things like resiliency.
That's the word.
That's the word that's sort of
exactly.
Actually, since the superstorm Sandy in New York,
that really spurred a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there was a lot of damage to infrastructure. Flood waters pouring into subway systems and causing a lot of damage. That people actually, rather than just worry about let's make sure we don't get too many people killed in a storm, they're actually now talking about being resilient so that the systems and structures
can withstand the water
storms, or in the case of those who argue for the problems of climate change, the potential for rising sea levels, which is not so much because the sea level is going to be permanently so high, but if it's a foot higher and then the storm comes, then it's a foot on top of what it once was, and then that can be really damaging.
But warmer waters also cause hurricanes to become more ferocious or something. It feeds it more.
Yeah. So you tend to become stronger, more powerful. Now, of course, the truth is that you can never make a determination from a single event what the cause is. It's sort of
no, but it's a combination of things. I mean, there's definitely people that are being listened to, and then people that are arguing against them. But I think that when it's the fourth largest city and growing, Houston, and I think I mentioned to you, all of Texas is actually growing in population versus other states.
Right.
Something's got to give, and everything. Oh, they got lots of space, but maybe that space being built is not being built for
if you just sprawl out into areas that are going to be
you've got to have
potentially
drainage. You
flood
have to have prairie land. You have to have, what do they call it, greenways or
floodways?
No, there's a word with greenscape or something. You've got to plan accordingly. Just like Arizona now is planting what should be planted, drought-resistant plants rather than golf courses, right? The least sustainable. So.
And in some, certainly in some places, having areas that can actually absorb wetland areas and whatever.
Well, that's what they don't have.
Right.
Prairie lands, I guess, would absorb it, but they have pavement now. So.
But, just to sort of roll it back to Cambridge, when people argue about what's best for the future, for resiliency, planning in a day of climate change for an area like Alewife in Cambridge. Some people mistakenly think that Alewife is going to be this wonderful wetland area where the water will be absorbed into the earth, but it's really all like a teacup. It's basically a clay underlay.
Oh, clay is bad. Right.
Water
That's
doesn't
what
absorb.
Houston a lot is clay. Yeah.
So if water can't absorb in, you really all you got to do is get it out of there. And
so what are they doing then in Alewife? Or what have they done?
It's not so clear what. I mean, certainly the fact that they had a lot of hardscape over the years. I think removing some of the hardscape helps.
Right.
But also they need to have more capacity, if major storms come, to be able to convey water away. So that means, it's kind of funny when not funny, but it's sort of there are a few places you can see where people took waterways like the Alewife Brook or the Neponset River. Yeah. Or there's even a brook in Wellesley, and you see where they tried to sort of put concrete banks. Yeah. What an incredible joke that is. This notion that because ultimately things get scoured away, and all of those things that you put into place to sort of, make it look all nice and buttoned up never seem to work.
So you're saying the hardscape is actually detrimental to the landscape. It should have been built.
Alewife Brook, for example, shouldn't be bottlenecked into like a couple of tiny culverts passing under like the Mass Ave Bridge. Yeah. So ultimately what happens, or even if I don't think it's particularly relevant there, but if you build a railroad track across an area, and you just have a very lightweight culvert underneath it, water needs to get past the railroad tracks to get its way out to the Mystic River. Can you really move enough water in a short enough time to make it happen? So a lot of the systems that were put in place, decades and decades ago, are inadequate for actually doing the conveyance. That's a big problem. The Amelia Earhart Dam was actually put in for flood control.
Where is that?
That's on the Mystic River. Near Assembly Square.
Oh, that's what it's called.
Yeah, but the thing is that that's great for keeping the floodwaters from flooding in.
That's mentioned in the Charles River Dam.
Yeah. But it also cuts down on the capacity to get the water out. So there are pumps that actually get the water out past the dam. Right. And I think there's more capacity to put in additional pumping capacity to actually do that, which would actually alleviate some of the flooding.
I think I heard that word in reference to some of the things I heard today about that they weren't put in some places in Houston.
Right.
Because cost or whatever.
Yeah, they say, that was a storm like that'll never happen.
Yeah, see, there you go.
And it happens, right? And then what happens, right? Anyway, it was a pretty big deal, and there are definitely lessons to be learned. I mean, from my point of view, even if you were a climate change denier, there's still value in making your cities more resilient. Yep. So use it as an excuse, for God's sake, but it's actually a good idea to harden the systems.
I just wonder why people keep building on. I heard one story today, and it was the third time they built. I'm thinking, well, why are you building in a place that's vulnerable to floods?
Yes, sometimes they do because it's sort of like what happened in New Orleans in that was it then called the Ninth Ward,
Well, they never came back though.
Right, but the thing is, it tended to be sort of the poorer people who tended to have homes in some of those areas.
Oh,
because
well,
it
you
was
look at
cheaper.
the people they're rescuing, a lot of them, it's
Yeah.
true, you know, they're in floodplain, they don't have
That's
flood
right.
insurance, and they have
Right.
cheaper homes because they're risking,
You
right.
take a risk, yeah. You know,
but,
so,
I don't know, this one,
yeah,
three
and
times.
in the sort of the cure
Yeah.
for New Orleans after Katrina, you know, there was, I think it was, I don't know how it was ever resolved, but there were certainly some who believed that some of those areas should not be rebuilt and should be actually made into areas
and
where
maybe it was, I
Yes.
don't know, I haven't followed.
probably was a mix, I imagine.
Well, it certainly has not gotten back the population it had. In fact, 250,000 people stayed, I think, or some. They were evacuated to Houston during Katrina, and many of those people stayed. Not 250, but many decided to stay.
So some of
yeah.
the people around Houston actually have
And
now.
they've suffered already from
So-
Katrina. I was
yeah,
listening to this
yeah.
guy. It was just terrible, just terrible.
Wow, that's a hell of a
I
thing
know.
to go through both of those storms.
Yeah.
So, anyway, there are a few other things getting back to home here on Cambridge. I think last week just mentioned is sort of the ongoing saga of Vale Court, which in Bishop Allen
Any
Drive.
news on that? You said that they were denied their demolition for the at least they.
Yeah. Okay. So again,
now where is it?
and I'm not gonna even attempt to give the whole story here.
I just
but-
want to know what the status of it is.
All right, so I thought, okay, so the city was going to do the demolition of Vale Court, you
Right.
know, and to make way for new affordable
Right.
housing for some population. It's not
Yeah.
clear, you know,
But definitely all affordable.
that's that
Yeah.
right because I think it's the
Yeah.
Affordable Housing Trust would be sort of
Right.
managing this, I think.
Okay.
But so the thing is that then the former owner, you know, whom the city paid under an eminent domain taking.
Mhm.
Filed for an injunction to block the demolition, supposedly because he had to retrieve some stuff, right?
Mhm.
It seemed very silly. And I thought, oh, that'll get dispensed really quick, but apparently it hasn't been dispensed so
Oh,
quickly.
dear.
So the demolition remains stopped
Oh,
until further
jeez.
notice, and you know, and I've actually received like multiple notices from the city, sort of saying, nope, injunction stands. There'll be no
It's terrible.
demolition. So if you were expecting that to happen sometime soon, you know, hang tight because it ain't happening.
Well, then
just
it may
yet.
not happen because, you know, the
Eventually.
time to do is now, but then you get
Yeah.
into winter, they're not gonna start doing it in winter.
Yeah, no, actually, a demolition you certainly could.
Well,
and
the
you could-
demolition, right, but they
and you
probably
could lay a
wanted it,
you could get a foundation going certainly between
but
now
that
and
should be done
November.
before winter, yeah,
Really should, yeah.
yeah.
You know, but
I
anyway,
hope they
based
can-
on nothing, I suspect there's other things going on there.
I
so
hope they
we'll see
can
how that
adjust it
plays
soon,
out.
yeah.
We did have another, I think was now the third successful Central Flea event,
Yeah, I didn't go to this one.
put together sort of in conjunction with the good folks from the Central Square Business Association,
Mhm.
but it was actually the same folks, same core group who puts these flea markets together that were doing it in the South End until they lost their space.
Well, some part, Soho or whatever they call it is still there, I was
All right.
confused, yeah, I mean, there's a big thing in the south, and this is another, group
Okay.
that
But
works
it's
somewhere down there, yeah.
it's been enormously popular,
Mhm.
and as I've pointed out to a number of people, you know, living close to 40 years in the area, never seeing more than about 4 people in this gigantic parking lot.
Mm.
It's such a pleasure to see
Yeah.
thousands of people in the
Yeah.
parking lot.
Yeah,
You know, it just sort of gives you a little taste of what can be. if
I
people
like the
get
food
mind to it.
trucks, I mean, the rest of the stuff isn't anything I needed,
Yeah.
because it's mostly crafts and arts and things
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think for the first one,
Vintage
maybe the
clothes.
first couple, they didn't even charge a fee for the vendors or the food
Oh,
trucks.
they didn't?
Well, they just wanted to get things going, so maybe
Oh.
they're charging a fee now. I don't
I
even
would
know.
think so, yeah.
Yeah, but pretty much they're getting just, you know, they don't have to pay for the use of the space.
Oh, well,
so
that's good then, because
so it's just a good
that makes
event
me
to
feel
run.
better, because I don't think some of the vendors did that
Yeah.
well, but.
But insofar as the business association might be taking on some costs for hosting it, putting it on, I hope they're just getting a little bit of cash back just to cover that. I think there was one truck there
I
actually
think they
paid a good penny to
Yeah.
somebody selling this sort of fruit product or dried fruit.
Yeah, I
or
think all the
something.
food trucks
Paid
have
some
to
good
pay
money.
something, that's.
Yeah,
they're-
so-
This organization needs to make money.
Anyway, so they'll do it again last Sunday of every month through end of October. So I guess that
Yeah.
means we got 2 more to go.
Right.
So
Good.
anyway, so that was pretty great. Not that I want to obsess over Volpe,
Mm.
the Volpe site, right? But that is the one standing petition that's in front of the city council right
Yeah,
now.
and there's another meeting, and I think we said when it was, but it's somewhere
Yeah,
in
it's,
your, it's, I think it's next week.
Yeah, sometime next week. I don't remember exactly, but look it up. There's another ordinance, the second ordinance committee meeting on the Volpe site. Now, in the interim, I don't know if we mentioned this last week or before, but there was a group. I'm told a group of students who at MIT, graduate students, who filed kind of a cousin petition to the Volpe petition, in which they want to demand that MIT be obliged to build 1,800 units of graduate student housing, which
Over a certain period though, right?
so and they basically want to put it in as a phased-in requirement where before you can build out the commercial stuff on Volpe, you'd have to
It's
build
part of the PUD
some
development,
number of units of the housing, and then before
Right.
you can finish the next
Right.
phase of the commercial development, you'd have to do this. So this is 1,800 units over and above the regular housing for non-students that was already part of the proposal, right? Which
But
was
again, I don't think it all has to be in
it doesn't have
that
to
site.
be in there, right? But it would have to be a cost borne by MIT. So they're actually asking
Right.
quite a lot for this. The thing that I find curious about it, and I'm not trying to shoot it down exactly, is that this is not this. It's not like all the graduate students of MIT got together and sort of thought this through and decided this is what we want to do. There's members of the Graduate Student Council at MIT, for example, who actually would not have supported this particular approach. MIT's got a working group now working to kind of hash out what should their obligations be for providing graduate student and presumably also postdoc housing. I believe they're setting kind of a hard deadline for mid-October to come up with recommendations and a plan for that, which I think is smart, because this notion about sort of doing the housing requirements is not the type of thing that usually appears in the zoning.
Yeah.
Usually it appears as a memorandum of understanding that's tied to the passage of the zoning. So basically saying you commit to a certain schedule and a certain other commitments over and above what the zoning is. Zoning really should be about planning the site, right? It shouldn't be sort of about finding peace in the Middle East or anything else that's too far away, right? So it's usually done with a memorandum of understanding. So I hope that that's kind of how these things sort of dovetail in. I imagine this will have some influence, because ultimately you do have to get 6 votes. So if there are some people who are saying, well, we're not going to vote for this unless you do this.
You have to get 6 votes from who?
City councilors.
Oh, so they're
2/3
basically
vote.
appealing to the city councilors.
Well, it's a zoning petition as well. Now, it's not
boy.
phrased like a zoning petition,
Yeah.
quite honestly, because when you file a zoning petitions, it's to amend the zoning,
Right.
but it's not actually amending anything.
It's really not a zoning petition.
It fundamentally isn't.
Yeah.
So from a procedural and legal
I think they
perspective,
should.
is something
Do they
really
even have to vote
funny
on
about
this?
The
They just say
ultimately-
this isn't an appropriate
Well,
vehicle to
I don't
do
think
this?
that's what would happen. The way
Yeah.
it happens is it's not actually before the city council yet, because they
Right.
don't meet until I think September 11, is it?
Is it for,
something like that.
oh, the first meeting's of the 11th, yeah.
So it will be before the city council on that date.
Okay,
And then typically what happens, the city council refers it to the planning board and the
Okay,
ordinance
the whole-
committee, and
yeah,
then there's a process. So then you have these 2 petitions sort of in tandem, one relating to the other, kind of in a sense
so
supplementing
does
the
the
other.
legal department get involved to see what the language is?
They
whether
will.
it- okay,
Yeah, I'm sure they will be asked to offer an opinion on this
Yeah.
here. But this really has to be viewed more as sort of playing hardball, kind of leverage game.
Yeah,
It's not really planning so much. It's just that they want to force MIT's hand.
well, the Cambridge Residents Alliance are very big on MIT building more housing, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're all together on that.
Actually, Jonathan King, who's
Yeah, he's active in that, right?
professor, and a former planner from MIT, Bob Sima, is sort of actively involved in this.
Oh,
No, it's not clear, quite honestly, what the motivations really are here, because
to get more housing. For students, graduate students.
Well,
No, I think that's what
honestly,
it is.
those guys, their big issue was really over the south of Main Street zoning, where they got beat up on that one, where the city council passed zoning, which was exactly the opposite of what they had wanted. So there's a little bit of this there's a little touch of payback, I think, is going on here too. Besides, one of those people lives in 303 Third, which is right there next to Volpe, so it's a neighbor who maybe doesn't like what's being proposed. So there's that aspect as well.
Right.
But what makes this political and noteworthy is that, and I haven't seen the list of all the signers, but there are some MIT graduate students, again, activists of one form or another, and 4 city council new candidates.
Oh.
Right, yeah.
I thought you said it's from the Graduate Student Council.
It's not from the Graduate Student Council.
Oh.
I think they're the group that's actually working a little bit more cooperatively.
So this is
than
just an
MIT.
ad hoc group.
I think it's an ad hoc group.
So
Again,
who are
I don't know that for sure.
Who are the candidates that
The
are?
candidates who actually are a part of this, I have around here somewhere, but I don't know if I have it
That'd be very interesting.
handy. One is Jeff Santos.
Oh,
one
who I haven't
is-
seen anything about. But
Right.
He's the radio personality.
Yeah, exactly. But so as I say, I'm a little.
I can see now this is going to become sort of their campaign platform in a way.
Yeah, I think that, right, I mean, again, I'm not trying to be too cynical about this,
No,
but the
but
thing is
so
that this
who else?
is
You got
not
it
just
there?
a good idea. You don't ask for when
Yeah.
there was something called the Clay Report, which basically did a
Yeah.
study and said, well, we think MIT has to build about,
Oh, here we go.
they have to build something like 500 or 600
Oh.
graduate students housing right away,
Yeah.
and ultimately in the order of about 1,000. Okay, so that was a pretty well thought out report. This proposal says you have to build 1,800, so it's going way beyond what the Clay Report
Yeah.
actually even recommended. The candidates
You see that they're
who
very
were-
varied. They're not
so
really.
Elon Levy, Jeff
yeah.
Santos, Sungul Siddiqui, and Quentin Zondervan
Yeah, who are
were the ones who were signatories
not
to this.
necessarily this little tight group.
I think they were all sort of going for the endorsements from the same entities, though.
Oh, okay.
So who's really
Interesting.
behind this? It's really
Yeah.
kind of hard to say.
All right. Well,
Ultimately,
that'll be interesting.
my biggest objection about the
Yeah.
way this it's more, a little more general than just Volpe. It's this notion that it's almost like making decisions by committee.
Yeah.
Rather than just sort of come up with something fabulous and great and positive for the city, what happens is a proposal comes in, and then it's sort of like, well, what do we have to knock out of this in order to appease this particular faction? What do we have to knock out or give in order to make sure that this counselor gets his or her vote, or whatever? And then sometimes what you end up with is a product that nobody loves. And that's my biggest concern.
It just from not knowing everything, the ins and outs that you do, I just think it's something that they've been shouting for different groups, and this is their opportunity to do it. Because
That's
MIT
true.
is appearing before that.
That's right.
To me, I think
Right.
it's just a convergence of stuff.
But there is one thing that's a
Yeah.
little strange here, but I guess
Yeah.
it's something that MIT and Harvard and other largish entities
Yes.
often suffer from, which is that
Yeah.
it's the perception that they are wealthy beyond your
Exactly,
wildest
right.
dreams, and
Well,
therefore
Harvard,
they can
maybe.
be simply made to
Yeah.
do anything you please,
Right.
right? Cure all the ills of the city. I heard there was one
Right.
city councilor who was trying to make a demand that MIT had to be responsible for relocating
Oh.
the public works yard.
Oh.
And I thought, well, hold on, isn't
Wait.
that your job? city
Hello.
councilor?
Yeah.
You know, but again, it's this perception that MIT is.
Yes. No, their job is to keep going for the next 200 years, and they have to use their money wisely and use private money. Yeah,
Right.
and it's
Yeah,
understandable.
and
yeah.
there was this sort of, I think they call it the 2030 plan for MIT, came out maybe 10 years, but somewhere around the 150th anniversary of the Institute, and basically pointed out that the core campus is falling apart. And anybody who works there, like I do,
Yeah, you can
knows
see,
that
yeah.
the windows are falling out, and
Yeah.
there are some real vulnerabilities. Now they've done
Yeah.
some repairs piecemeal. They redid down around where the math department is, but they have a lot of work, and they estimated the price tag to be sort of in the sort of billionish range.
Really?
Yeah, I mean it's
Wow.
not a small amount, and
No.
and a lot of the reasons why MIT is choosing to develop some of the properties over around Kendall Square, not related to Volpe, was that they were just basically underperforming properties for which the MIT could actually derive income to help fuel some of the projects they really needed to do with the core campus.
Right.
I don't think they were going to be bidding on the Volpe site purely as an act of university charity either.
No, they're
right?
going to invite in private, developers to, and then,
Right.
related to their kind of industries that they like, and
Exactly.
see what goes.
But I think the beauty of having MIT as the developer for Volpe is that in fact they don't have the same profit incentive
That's
that
right.
some developers might. They have much more of a long.
Although they don't want to, but as they did point out, they can't lose money on it. They can't.
They're not doing this as
right.
out of the kindness
Pure,
of their heart.
exactly,
It's an act of
right.
pure charity,
Right.
and I think that's something
It has to
people
work
have to understand.
financially. Yeah.
If you just load it up with more and more and more and more constraints, you do reach a point where MIT says, you're just asking us to just
Right.
lose
If
money.
we have
and
this
that's
many
not what
less, we're not going to be able to
Right.
do this. So
So
yeah.
you're in a sense looking the gift horse in the mouth. I mean, MIT is actually probably the developer that would give you the best outcomes.
Yeah.
So find what works and get a best outcome.
Yeah.
And hopefully do it, by November, October 31st is the deadline.
Yeah.
I think it would just be a tremendous shame if this city
Yeah.
council just kicked the can down the road.
Yeah.
That to me would be dereliction of duty.
I think the fact that it's running so many years, like this phase, it could be 10, 15 years, that there's plenty of room for things to
Yeah.
change too.
Yeah. So, nothing's going to happen right away anyway, right?
Right.
And meanwhile, the rest of Kendall Square is going up as we
Yeah.
speak, right? It's actually kind of interesting to watch it happen.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's actually, to be perfectly honest, it's sort of been interesting living in this area where I used to bike through Kendall Square on my way down to being a graduate student at MIT back when it was just leveled
Yeah.
and it was nothing.
Right,
And
factories,
to actually watch it change and
Yeah.
morph around, and now housing being built, infill housing in places where nobody had originally envisioned
Yeah.
housing at all.
I still don't see it as housing for people that are
Yeah,
people. That's right.
Volpe
it's
is an
not me.
opportunity because you're getting
Yeah.
closer to the more
I guess
residential
so.
part of town.
Yeah.
So I think it does make
Smaller
sense to have
scale,
it.
yeah.
So yeah, a fair amount of housing there is absolutely what everybody wants, but it can't be the whole thing. That's to be
Right.
sure. So.
Okay.
Anyway, so we're pretty much out of time for this half hour, but we'll come back and I want to talk a little bit about Plan
Plan
E in the next
yes.
half hour. So we'll see you then on Cambridge Inside Out.